Hello Art Explorers! Today we are making a watercolor picture. I'm going to show you step by step of how to make a owl watercolor, but you are welcome to paint anything you would like. If you step by the library and picked up a kit, you will find 2 pieces of watercolor paper, a set of watercolor paints, and a watercolor paintbrush. Also for this activity, you can use your bag to open it up and put it on your table to make sure you don't get paint anywhere. And I'll show you how to do that once we get started. If you picked up a kit from the library, a couple things you still might need is a pencil if you would like to draw before you paint, a permanent marker or a pen or markers if you'd like to outline your work when you're done, a paper towel to help you clean off your brush, and water. Also, if you see the paintbrush you received, if you turn the top, you fill water up in there. So you can fill this whole tube with water and then close it back up before we get started. Before we get started, like I mentioned, the bag that your kit came in could be used on the table so you can paint on top of. You could either keep the bag folded like this, or if you need to cover more area, you can always open it up. And you could always rip the bottom off if it's in the way. I'm going to just flip it over so I can push that part down. There. I'm going to have my paper towel here. I filled up my paintbrush. I've got my pencil. I'm going to open up my paints. As you can see, there are 2 pieces of paper. One will be for your final picture. The other one is to practice how watercolors work. Watercolors need water to use them. So these are all dried, brand new. I just opened them, and you can't get any paint out of there. These paintbrushes are nice. If you open them up, and you have them filled with water, the water comes down into the paintbrush and gets your paintbrush wet. Make sure it's screwed on nice. Now, if you're having trouble using that, you're always welcome to have a cup of water that you could just dip your paintbrush into also. Before we paint our owl, I want you to play with the watercolors on our extra piece of paper. Try different techniques and try different ways of using the paint. Also, you could try each color and see which colors you like. So if you go into this one, remember you need water to make it work. And just do one straight line. And the longer you go, you're just running out of paint, right? So when you're doing something that's filling up more of our paper, you might have to stop and get more if you want it to stay that darker color. Now, if as you paint, you could see the paper through it, it probably just means your paintbrush is getting dry and you just need to give it a little squeeze to get the water going, or just dip it in your water. Now, I don't want to go straight from my purple into my yellow. I want to make sure I clean off my brush, and if you have a paper towel nearby, wipe it off until you don't see any more color, and that's when you know it's safe to go into the next color. Now let's see what our yellow looks like. This time I'm going to try just making dots all the way down. Oh, so that gives it a different technique. and a different texture. I'm going to clean that off, wipe it off. Now I'm going to try my orange. This time I'm going to do little circles. Oh, see, I could see my paper a lot. Sometimes that's a cool texture, but that probably means my brush is a little too dry. There we go. And now I'm getting that water in there and moving it around. I'm going to get a little more water in my orange and try it again. There we go. Next is red. This one I'm going to do zigzag. Now blue. This one I'm just putting it on my paper and seeing what happens. You can kind of see how the water changes how the paints go onto the canvas. Next is green. I'm gonna tap this one on because it reminds me of trees, and that gives it kind of a different texture too. And last is our black. I'm just making some lines with that. Now with your extra paper, you can make a different picture. You could cut it in half and make 2 pictures, or you could use this one just to try out the paints. Now let's say I want a slightly darker red. So what I could do is get some red, put red on here, get a little water, then wash off my brush really good, tap it off. I'm going to get a little purple, and I'm going to go along the other side, and I can mix them together on my paper and make a petal with 2 different colors. So that is blending, where I take 2 different colors and I blend them together. There's some colors that don't blend very well or make kind of a muddy color, but some blend together really nice and are pretty. It all depends on what you're trying to, it all depends on what you are trying to create. So we can take a little yellow, rinse it off really good, tap it off, get some orange. I'm going to put orange on this side and blend the yellow and the orange together. Now orange is a very strong color because it's got red in it. So it kind of took over that yellow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and add yellow back in. So you can pause the video now and keep playing around with your extra piece of paper and getting to know watercolors. Once you are ready to work on an owl picture, or you are welcome to paint anything you want on the other paper. If you like to make more than one thing, you could cut the paper in half a couple of times, and you could even get 4 pieces out of this if you want to make little ones. You also could have done that with your test piece. Cut it into 4, and that way you have 4 different watercolor pages to practice your watercolors on. So I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to get this one. All right, when you're ready, I'm going to paint half of an owl's face on this. The first thing I'm going to do is grab my pencil and I'm going to draw very, very lightly. You can see through watercolors. So if I draw really dark, you're going to see that right through the paint. So I'm only drawing lines where I think I'm going to have either a black outline or some darker color there to cover it. You don't want to draw in all your details because it will show through the paint. So I think I'm going to start with his nose. And by nose, I mean his beak. And then owls have pretty big eyes. So I'm going to make a nice big circle. And the inside circle. And the top of the head. And there's kind of a swoop of texture around the eye. And then from the nose up to where the little ears are. And then I'm going to swoop down. Maybe a little less. Oh. So I'm going to erase the lines that I don't want. But make sure you have a good eraser because this one looks like it's leaving some marks. That's okay. So always test your erasers before you use them because some leave a mark and some are better. Okay, so I'm going to turn around so you can see. So I drew the beak, the eye, and a little bit around where how big I think he's going to be. The other thing to keep in mind with watercolors is if I put a dark color down, I'm not going to be able to paint over that. And any colors I paint on top of each other are going to mix together. So if I paint yellow and I want red next to it, if I put red on top of that yellow, it's going to look orange. So if I don't want it orange, it's better to put the red where you want the red to be and the yellow where you want the yellow to go. And I'll show you that first. So we're going to start with the owl's eye. So I'm going to get some yellow. And this owl is going to be abstract, which means it's not realistic. We're going to have blue and purple and yellow. If you want yours to look more realistic, you're welcome to look at pictures of real owls and copy those. So I'm going to start by filling in my owl's eye. Now remember, your paintbrush could only hold so much paint. So you have to paint a little bit and then go back for more paint and then keep going. Now I can paint over that small circle because that's going to be black, and that's okay to paint over because the black will cover the yellow. All right, now I want this to be a little bit blended, so I'm going to start painting the other colors right away. So I'm going to get some orange. The other thing to keep in mind is the way you paint and move the paintbrush leaves a different type of texture. We kind of talked about it when we were practicing. Now, if I just filled it in scribble, you're going to see that. But I want the eye to have marks that go inward. So I'm going to start on the edge and go halfway. Start on the edge and bring it in. So I'm not just scribbling everywhere, I'm bringing the paint the way and the direction I want the texture to look. I'm going all the way around. Now if I go outside the lines a little bit, that's okay because there's going to be a black line around it to clean it up. And also remember, this one's abstract, so it can look a little bit different and you don't have to stay inside the lines for this one. Once I get the orange on, I'm going to add a little bit of red. Right along the top. And a little more water. And if the color doesn't work right away, you probably just need to mix a little bit more water into the paint. Now I don't want too much red, so I'm going to stop there. And I'm going to clean off my brush. And then I'm going to pull that red and mix it with what's there. Now that has to dry. I'm going to look at my picture. This one has a little bit of yellow randomly around the owl. So before I get into too darker colors, I'm going to grab some yellow. And I'm going to put a little bit under the chin. And up by the ear and down the side a little bit. Remember, it's abstract, so I'm going to add a little bit of water and just move that yellow around. So I filled in my eye and I added a little bit yellow around. Next, I'm going to go with some green. So for my green, we got a little bit of green down in the wing. And again, I want the wing to go very gently up and down. I don't want to scribble this one. Next, we're going to fill up the background. The background has green and blue circles. So what I'm going to do is get paint on my brush. I'm going to push down and just twirl my brush around and make circles all over the top. Then some of them I'm just going to get water and do it so it's even fainter. So it has less and less paint, so you see it less and less. And I'm even just taking a little water and just dancing my brush around to fill in some of that white space. There is going to be other colors up there, but I just want to get a nice base of green. There's also that same effect all the way down the side. So I'm going to twirl my brush, twirl my brush. Once I start running out of paint, I'm just getting a little bit of water, moving it around. And then I'm just gonna, again, just using water. I haven't gotten any new paint. I'm just using water to move what paint is already on this paper all around. Again, I'm just dancing my brush around with some water. Blending it in. I'm going to do that. I'm going to get a little more paint and I'm going to do it on the bottom too. Now, I'm going to get a little bit of blue And I'm gonna do the same thing, but just a little bit less up on top. So I'm gonna take my blue and I'm gonna swirl it, but not as many swirls as I did my green. But that's just what I'm doing. If you like the blue better up there, you can do more blue. And then I'm dancing it around to make sure I fill in and blend. So I'm blending it into the green, out this blue circles. Remember, you can color in the owl any color you want. This one is abstract, which means it's not gonna look like a real owl. But if you would like to do yours any color, this is where you could start figuring that out. So his little forehead, I'm gonna start with purple. And I'm not gonna just scribble it in, I'm gonna fill it in by dabbing it so it looks like feathers are filling them up. And if you want it to be darker, you either mix it up more so the water gets more paint before you use it, or go over it a couple times. You can even let it dry and do a second coat, and that will even give it more texture. Okay, so I like that. Then I'm going to take the purple and I'm going to fill in the part right below the eye all the way up to where the beak is. And the beak's going to be black, so that's okay if you get it in there a little bit. And again, I'm going to make sure I have enough water. I'm just going to flick out from the middle to make it look like feathers. The other thing you can do too is clean off your brush and start from the bottom and bring it in. If you want a light purple feathered in from the bottom, because I'm just pulling the paint that's already on the paper right now. I'm not even adding any more purple, and I'm getting purple. Then the other color I'm going to use is some blue over here that goes around that mask, around the eyes. And again, I'm just doing little tiny dashes all the way around to make it look like feathers. And this is where one of my pencil lines is, so I'm trying to make sure this paint covers my pencil lines and I can't see through. And if you see, if I go back through it again, it's going to just add more layers and it's going to keep getting darker. Also, there's some blue over to the side. I'm going to bring that little ear back in here. And I'm going to find the edge of my owl again and do the same dashes technique. I'm going to go back into my purple. And I'm going to add a little bit of purple dashes to this part here. And I'm going to start filling up the body. So I'm going to start doing bigger paint strokes, but still keeping with the idea that it's feathers. And I'm filling it up with feathers. I might even get more blue and blend those together a little bit. So right now I'm just filling up the rest of it, going back and forth between all the colors you've been using, especially if you use different colors than I'm using. I'm just moving them around. I still am leaving some spots white. I'm just getting more purple and not blending it too much, leaving some of it a little bit darker purple. So to not blend it, it means don't go over it anymore. Just put it on there and don't touch it again. At this point, I'm going to move to the black. You are welcome to either use a black permanent marker for some of this, or you could use the watercolor paint. I'm going to start with the watercolor paint, but if there's any super details that I want a little more control when I do it, I might move to a marker. So I'm going to start with the beak. I already have an outline that I drew, so I want to make sure I cover my pencil lines. And this has a little bit of white showing, so it looks like the light is reflecting off of it. So there's a little part of it I'm not going to paint. I'm painting around it. Just like that. Now the first layer looks a little gray and not real dark. So you can let that dry and do another coat, or when you have the paint or the water in the paint, mix it up a little bit more to get a little more of that paint mixed up in your for your paintbrush. The next one I'm going to do, so I'm going to turn this around. So I'm going to work on the forehead. So the forehead has a little black, little tiny lines along the back. This is where if you want to use a marker or a pen, you can. But I'm going to make my paintbrush as thin as possible. I'm going to go really light. And I'm just going to make little dashes along the top all the way to where the ear is. There is also some dashes to help make the lines in the forehead. I'm just going to do a couple of those. It's always better to do a little bit less, and you can look at it and make sure you like it, and then always go back in and do more. The next line we're going to follow is this line we drew from the beak up to the ear. And this I'm going to push and flick up, so it looks kind of like eyelashes. Push and flick up. Okay. Then once I make it to the ear, the lines go the opposite way, and they're a little bit longer. So I'm going to go from here down, just like when we did the faint little lines across the top. There are some that go around here. And it doesn't have to be the same size and the same spacing all the way around. I'm going to skip some spots and do some longer and some shorter. Now the part that we talked about where I left white is because I have some specks and little dashes like that in that part. So I'm going to start with that first. Just do some of these lines. So it looks like there's white feathers there. It's a little darker around the eye, so I'm going to trace it a little bit with not too much black, so it's a little more gray. Next is filling in the eye. This one also has some white specks in it, so I'm going to go around where I don't want to fill it in. The next is I'm going to do an outline around the eye. Now remember, you could always turn your paper. So if it's easier for me to make the curve this way instead of this way, I do this side and then turn my paper and do the other side. So I'm going to start by going along the bottom, and as soon as I start drying out, I'm going to get more paint. So how we filled in the feathers, making that kind of texture, figuring out where we want the black to be for outlining purposes or just decorative. Now is your chance to just go through, because at this point your painting is different than mine, and mine's different than yours. So you might need different things than I do. So I'm going to go along the edge just a little bit. And then right around here, there's some bigger black lines making feather marks. And there's a lot down here. Now you can keep going, or once you get to a spot where you're happy with it, you can do the final touch of finding a pen or a pencil even, and you gotta sign your name at the bottom because you are a wonderful artist. So I'm gonna sign Miss Mary at the bottom. You could always put the date, or you could always sign the back too if you don't want to sign on the front. After you've finished your painting and it's all dry and you've signed it, if you would like to show me how it turned out, you can send us a Facebook message or email the library so I can see it. I hope you all had fun with watercolors and that you were able to practice some different techniques and have a finished picture on the other piece of paper. Now you can also keep using the watercolors that you have left. You can use it on regular paper. The only thing that might happen is if you use too much water, it might start to break the paper or it will start curling a little bit. This paper is made for watercolors, so it's made to get a little wet. Well, thank you so much, my art explorers. I think you did a great job and I can't wait to see how they turned out. Till next time, see you later.